And for a deeper look at the oil industry here in the U.S., we're joined by Adam Perdue in Houston, Texas. He's a research economist at the Institute for Regional Forecasting at the University of Houston's Bauer College of Business. Adam, thanks for joining us tonight.
It's a pleasure.
Adam, after California, Texas is the largest economy in the U.S. with a GDP of $1.5 trillion. How much of that is directly from oil or linked to the oil or energy industry?
Well, it's very hard to measure exactly how much is directly related to the oil industry. It's definitely a much smaller percentage than it was in the 80s, but it's still a very significant part of the Texas economy.
Well, with oil losing so much ground, oil has lost almost 70% from its $100 per barrel high back in July of 2014 to around $35 a barrel this week. What impact has that had on Texas?
Well, Texas for 2015 still managed to grow. We grew at about a 1.2% rate, which is much slower than we were in during the boom times. And then across the state, it's had varying impacts, with the hardest hit areas being the actual oil fields, so Eagle Ford, and then out in West Texas in the Permian Basin. And then with Houston being the capital, we've also felt the effects quite strongly.
Well, Texas as a state has actually done a pretty decent job of diversifying away from oil and the energy sector. Which industries in Texas are proving to be more oil resilient?
Well, so we're talking about, when we talk about oil and gas, we're actually talking about three separate industries. And so that exploration and production is what's hurting right now because they're not getting paid as much for their product. But along the Gulf Coast, we're still the major petrochemical complex in the U.S. and even in the world. And so they're doing well. And then if you look outside of Houston and outside of the oil fields, San Antonio has a lot of government employment and a lot of tourism. Austin has been picking up technology employment, and Dallas is picking up finance and trade distribution. And so then the different cities have different roles in the economy. And then naturally, as the economy of a state grows, you move away from natural resources and end up with a more diversified economy.
Okay, well, Texas may be better diversified, but more than half of the publicly traded companies in Houston are oil and gas related. Houston's still really feeling a very strong impact. How has the oil collapse impacted the city?
Well, that's what, so oil and gas and upstream and downstream are still significant parts of the Houston economy, and they drive much of the rest of the economy for Houston. Well, so, and a lot of people were very pessimistic for last year, but we still managed to add between 17,000 jobs and 23,000 jobs, depending on if you believe the Dallas Fed or the Texas Workforce Commission. We're in a little bit more danger now because the number of oil rigs, which is a major driver in employment for the upstream exploration and production, had bottomed out in 2015, but since this year began, we lost another 150. And so Houston is probably looking for another year of relatively slow growth.
Well, you know, Adam, there's a constant boom and bust when it comes to the oil industry, and Houston has experienced this before. Houston lost 13% of its jobs in the 1980s when oil prices, again, then had a very drastic decline. Have the city and state leaders learned from that experience and are doing things to sort of mitigate a decline and the impact that it has on the economy and the peripheral economies?
Well, it's very difficult to mitigate the boom and bust cycle in the oil and gas industries. But primarily the strategy that the state of Texas has employed has been small government with little regulations, low taxes, but also low public services. And so that seems to have been possibly what has driven the growth of the state of Texas. And so then again, as I said before, as your economy grows, you naturally diversify away from natural resources, and you end up with a more complex economy where you offer higher level services. Yeah.
All right, well, Adam, it's not just Houston and Texas that are suffering from this. What other parts of the U.S. have been hard hit by the oil decline, and what has their response been?
Oh, well, so then, yeah, there's other states that had a much smaller economy when we went into the boom, and so that the boom from 2010 to 2014 made up a larger part of their growth and their total size, and so they're going to be much more strongly impacted, and so that they're going to have to make cuts, which we've seen in North Dakota and in Alaska.